Dungeon crawling games. They're like playing Dungeons and Dragons without all that tedious role playing and characterization. What's up, Internet? Jay here with Nerd Rage Against the Machine, and today we're going to do another compare and contrast video, this time about dungeon crawlers. Now, to be fair, there are a ton of other dungeon crawlers out there, but these are the two that tend to be thought of the most favorably or the most well-known in the genre, and they are Heroquest and Descent by Avalon Hill / Hasbro and Fantasy Flight Games, respectively. So, before we get too far in, I'm going to give you a brief history. Heroquest is definitely the older of the two of them. In fact, it started with this old guy back in the day. This is my original, well-loved, well-worn, parts of it have been reproduced in 3D printing to make it playable copy of Heroquest. Heroquest started life as a collaboration between Milton Bradley and Games Workshop. The idea being that Heroquest would be sold in places like Target, Walmart, Toys R Us, Kmart, pretty much any place you could buy board games. So it could sit in that same, rainy day nook that you might have your copy of Monopoly or Life or the Laverne and Shirley board game or any of those other, myriad of board games. The big benefit being, of course, that it is a dungeon crawler. It really is basically a kiddie version of D&D in a box. And for $20, you really can't beat it. There are a lot of players, a lot of gamers, I think, who, and this is what they cut their teeth on, Maybe mom or dad got it for them for Christmas or a birthday present, or they found it in the attic or what have you, and it set them on the path to becoming gamers that they are today. I remember for me, it was I was already into Warhammer and all that stuff, and Games Workshop's magazine White Dwarf had made reference to it a couple times, and I thought, well, that sounds cool. And one day I was shopping with my folks, and wouldn't you know it, we were, Shopco had a copy of Heroquest. I didn't even know it was coming stateside. Hell yeah, I'm picking this up. $20? Yeah. So yeah, it was, and I had a lot of fun with it. Even though I was old enough to kind of be older than most of the players who would get into it, it still was a nice, easy dungeon crawler. It was something you could pull out and run a dungeon in minutes. Saying that, the game, like all good things, didn't last forever. Whatever agreement Games Workshop and Milton Bradley had slowly dissolved. Milton Bradley did try some other Warhammer-esque games like Battle Master and the like, but and there, like I said, there was plenty of competition as well. But eventually, this thing went off the shelf, and in about the early thousands, Fantasy Flight Games, who had already made a dungeon crawl-like game with Doom, the based on the video game, of course, not the Frank Herbert novel. Doom, not Dune. Came out with this guy. This is Descent. This is actually the second edition. The first edition had a much bigger box. But Descent is a similar concept. It is a dungeon crawler. You pick a character, and in fact, a lot of what I had heard about this game was that it was meant to be kind of a spiritual successor to Heroquest, as, again, Heroquest was no longer available. Descent, however, does differ pretty radically in one way, and that is its level of complexity. Again, Heroquest was made to sit at Target and Walmart, Toys R Us, Kmart, and those kind of places where, in fact, the game was ages 10 and up, so, again, meant for kids. And not to say that adults can't play it, but definitely at least meant to be a gateway drug into heavier stuff. When Descent was made, I think the decision was pretty obvious that they were going to be that heavier stuff. That they wanted to hearken to the joys of a pick up and play like Heroquest, but at the same time offer a ton more meat in the package. And then recently, of course, this guy came out. This is the new re-release of Heroquest. And for the most part, this is no different than this guy back here. Other than some legal changes such as Famir, which are a traditionally Warhammer creature that were in the original game, are now abominations. Chaos is now called Dread in every respect. There are Dread Warriors, not Chaos Warriors. There's Dread Magic, not Chaos Magic. But insofar as, does this game play like that game? Absolutely. Everything else about it is semantics. The other big change. So, in this game, you have 4 character types. You have a barbarian, a dwarf, an elf, and a wizard. In the original, they were all men. In the new one, the elf is now female. It's a microscopic change, and honestly, I'm down with it. In fact, the Kickstarter even offered a reverse gender package if you'd gotten it through their Kickstarter scheme, whatever it was called. I think it's a HasLab. But point was, you would get the female barbarian, female dwarf, male elf, and female wizard that way. And that's really, I think, the big thing to keep in mind when looking at these two games side by side. They are very similar, but the biggest strengths between the two is this one is ease and this one is choice. Again, I mentioned the 4 character classes of Heroquest. Descent does not have 4 classes. Instead, it has a myriad of characters, and these characters are all named, such as Eric Albright, Chalara, Lysa, Virion the Falconer, Ronan the Wild, and there's a lot more material on these cards. This is also true with the dice. Both games use icon-based dice. So these are the dice for Heroquest. Basically, you get 2 normal 6-siders, red, and that's for movement, believe it or not. And then you get 6 of these symbol dice, 3 skulls, 2 white shields, and 1 black shield. Basically, skulls are used for hits, the white shields are used for heroic defense, and the black shields are for monstrous defense. This is all the dice that you need in this game. Any benefits normally come from either rerolls or from using more dice. Meanwhile, these are the dice that come in Descent. A rainbow plethora of colors, and weapons are normally marked with different colored items. So, like, my sword might be a red and 2 green, or what have you. The symbols are a lot more complex. There's a lot more to memorize. And in that respect, Heroquest is definitely the easier of the 2 games. Definitely the more pick up and play. Even in this new deluxe, almost 6-inch thick box. And the big reason for this big chunky boy of a box over the old one really isn't changes in the game as much as changes in the aesthetic. The original game used a lot of cardboard, so like a cabinet might be just a plastic topper with a cardboard walls to make the cupboard. In here, it's just a plastic cupboard, and that's true with all the furniture. And there's a nice little storage system where in this one they're all in a box. Basically, there's like you take the lid and you put everything underneath the lid of the box kind of thing. But the rule books are pretty much verbatim, other than, like I said, the Chaos Dread thing and Abominations. Abomination stats equal Famir stats. So this is no different than that, other than quality of components, the aesthetic overhaul, and the price. This is now like $120 versus, like I said, I paid $20 for mine back in the day. And it's still, though, a great pick-up and play option. This is something you could pull out on a rainy day and get some kids around. Now, one thing I thought was weird is it's now listed as 14 and up. I don't know what really changed between the 90s and now, but it's now 14 and up. Descent, on the other hand, has a lot more going on. There are a ton more tokens in this box. I'm afraid to open the box to show you, but there's a ton of miniatures. There are a ton of tokens. The dice, as you can see, are way more complex and colorful. The other big thing, of course, is that Heroquest uses a single board, like Monopoly or what have you. I'm going to pull out the old one because it's the easiest to get to. But a single board such as this that you would then mark like areas that you can't go to. And this is actually a pretty flexible and easy way to do it. Whereas with Descent, and yes, I keep them all in the expansion, you have puzzle pieces to put together to build your scenario. So one thing is that makes this game, makes Descent a lot harder to set up, a lot longer to set up, because you're going to be, especially if you buy any of the expansions, because you're going to have, like I do, an entire box of puzzle pieces, and then you have to find that exact right piece to make this dungeon work the way you want it to. Both games do have pre-made dungeons. Both games are pretty much ready to play out of the box. But again, this Descent is going to have a lot more variety at the cost of complexity. This is also true with the monsters, whereas in this game, you have an assortment of monsters, over 70 minis. Those minis, though, are all the same thing. There's a group of skeletons, there's a group of zombies. The Descent ones are all color-coded with red and white, the red being the more dangerous version. So you have multiple layers of monsters. There are a lot more rules to consider in Descent, and a lot more expansion. There are 2 expansions out for this. I think it's Return of the Witch King and Keller's Keep, if I'm not mistaken. Whereas Descent has a ton of expansion. There are pre-made dungeon mats. There are single character packs. There are complete boxes like this Labyrinth of Ruin that I've got here. So yeah, I mean, definitely, this one's not going to get old, or will play a lot differently as you've got the expansions versus Heroquest. There's just simply more in Descent. However, again, that comes at the price of complexity. If you're wanting to teach kids how to play a fantasy board game, you almost can't go any better than Heroquest. Again, I really wish they would have made it a little less pricey and a little more available because of that nature. That's really, I think, where this game's strength is, and making it more available and economical would probably leverage that a lot better, especially in a world where so many YouTube channels already talk Dungeons and Dragons, and D&D is not the weird thing it was in the early 90s where like when I went to school, it was if you play D&D, you're either killing puppies for Satan, or you're the kind of mega nerd who sits in his basement arguing whether a Star Destroyer could beat the USS Enterprise. Descent definitely caters to that crowd, though, too. It is definitely more of a board game for those who like their board games. It's not super complex, don't get me wrong, but it certainly is a level over Heroquest. Ultimately, I think they're both good games. That's why I have them both in my collection still, and why I still spent money to buy the expanded version of Heroquest just to see how it is. But when it really comes down to is, what you want out of these games. If you're looking for a meaty dungeon crawling experience that's going to keep you going, for a couple seasons of gameplay, I would recommend Descent. If you're looking for something, again, to teach Billy and Susie how to play Dungeons and Dragons without getting them into Dungeons and Dragons and having a really pretty presentation, Heroquest is definitely the way to go. And with that, I guess my question is, what do you guys think of these titles? Have you played either of them? What's your preference? Please leave the comments below. And in the meantime, I bid you adieu and happy gaming.